6
Sorry.
at 7 p.m. No worries. While this is a hybrid meeting, which means it is available by Zoom, we have no members of the Finance Committee on Zoom. First, I'd like to welcome Paul O'Connor, who has recently been appointed by Michael Fee as our newest member, and he is a returning member of the Finance Committee. So welcome, and we will jump right in. Yeah.
Welcome back.
Are there any citizen requests to address the Finance Committee? Either live or by Zoom? Nope, no one has their hand up. Okay, approval of minutes of prior meetings. We have 2 sets of minutes on the agenda. We are only going to take up the June 21, 2023 minutes tonight. So has everyone had a chance to review the June 21, 2023 minutes?
I've reviewed them, I was there, and I move that we approve them.
Is there a second?
Second that?
Okay, I have a motion to approve the minutes and a second. Any discussion? No, so I call for a vote on approval of the minutes of June 21, 2023. Since we do not have any members on Zoom, we do not need to do roll call. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? I assume Paul O'Connor abstained. Okay. Now we have the town manager. Okay. Hi, welcome.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Back to school.
Yeah.
Your annual pilgrimage.
Yeah.
So as you know, I come every year, your first meeting in September. Hello, everyone. Welcome, Paul. Welcome back. To hear from you about your thoughts on the budget ahead for FY25 before we release the guidelines for our operating budget and capital budgets. I wanted to note a few things that we've been thinking of for the committee's consideration. We have 2 collective bargaining units up. That's our Public Works laboring non-custodial employees and our independent town workers, which is our catch-all unit. And again, we also have our non-union employees to consider with respect to pay and benefits. So that's happening. The bigger units, police and fire, are all settled through FY25. Another thing that's we've been talking about for a couple of years is that we have some staff and some services that are funded through our American Rescue Plan Act funds, which are expiring at the end of 24, so in the middle of 25. So we expect to see some DSR4s for half-year funding in FY25 for continuation of some of those, particularly in our health and human services and mental health programming. So that's where really the staffing has been for those positions. The select board has been engaged over the last 2 months on priority setting, goal setting, and that really does tend to impact our budget planning. So the select board will talk about goals and initiatives again at its meeting next week, and then may set them at the end of September, or it could be early October, depending on where that conversation goes. So that there'll be more information on that available. Something else that's going on that I'm sure, Dave, if you haven't talked about, we'll be talking about the contract cleaning. We are experiencing some disruptions in our contract cleaning program, and so it may be that our FY25 cost for contract cleaning is going to be higher than we would have previously expected. We are looking at all options for the school cleaning and seeing what's available to us, and we have a whole working group working on getting through this year and planning for next year. I think the last thing
Municipal buildings, sorry.
those are 3 schools, high school, Pollard and Newman, our contract cleaning.
And what are the disruptions?
We were having difficulties with the company, the incumbent company that at the end opted not to bid in terms of their ability to staff and clean the buildings. We went through the procurement process. The process started last fall. We selected a company. It was ABM, the company that used to have the contract before. The current company, which is leaving us, or now has left us, had won the bid. And after a few weeks when they started, the best way I could convey it is, I think they, started cleaning municipal schools was not what they were looking to do. They are in the process of exiting with, they gave us their notice that they want to void the contract. Given the ability of them to staff and clean the buildings this summer, they were not able to do that. We had to use our staff, a lot of overtime hours in order to get the buildings ready for opening. And we're starting the procurement process all over again. As an interim, we're using ironically one of the other companies that bid and did not win the contract, but they have a state contract and we're using them. It was notable that the price that we have to pay using the state contract is significantly more than what their bid was when we went out on our own. As I said, the process took 6 to 8 months to complete. So we're using them through April with them, that we'll have our new company on board for May 1. And that's where we're at. And when we do talk about the general fund operating budget, which is not on the agenda tonight, but at the next meeting, I'll have more information to share with you.
I'm sorry, I'm sure would it be worth, as part of the DPW budget, looking at, in light of this, bringing some of it in-house? I think we've had.
We're looking at all the options, we have to look at the fully loaded costs of all of them, and if there may be a reason to do one and not the other two, so we're looking at all that.
Kate, are these the only 3 schools that are outsourced?
Yes, yeah, we still outsource some bathroom, like Park and Rec buildings.
Park and Recreation,
different contract.
a different contract, a small dollar value, it's seasonal.
Just summers, yeah.
So it's an entirely different process. We did one time included in the major contract, but again, all the large cleaning companies had no interest in seasonal cleaning.
So like DeFazio, the pool, right, those stuff with it, but all the other schools and all the town buildings are municipal employees.
And High Rock Falls, is it because of their size? Is that why?
That was the driving
Yeah,
factor.
Newman Fall,
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Newman
square
Falls.
footage. yeah, it was this. I guess this is the last thing, and this is no surprise to finance committee, but we are facing large or significantly large capital projects in the next 10 years, and, we're thinking about that too, because that does have pressure on the operating budget. When buildings are bigger and, actually have air conditioning and more electricity and this kind of thing, so those are things we're already talking about. So that's what we've been thinking about in terms of putting together the operating budget requests, instructions for FY25, and I'd be happy to hear from the committee if you have thoughts on what you're thinking.
Did you all have, yeah, you
I
had a
just
chance
had
to review?
I
Yeah.
reviewed it very quickly. Can you just talk about the new for FY 2024, having department managers contact the director of human resources?
I had the same question.
That surprised me.
That's not new. Oh. Well,
It's like that was just new this year, right? Or I'm not understanding.
well, we've always had it. The question is sometimes somebody will put in an FTE request and they won't have talked to the director of HR about what the appropriate grade is, and so it just comes in as a $90,000 request, and we want to make sure that we said in advance that if they want a new position of, I mean, whatever it is, that they're asking for the right amount. It's always been a practice, maybe
Yes.
if we put new, is that this year's or last year's?
That was this
The
year's.
one you just
yeah.
sent.
No, that was last year's. I was sending it as, to show you guys.
Okay, yeah. I always come here before, so I'm like, Dave, did they go up?
No, I was gonna say.
Yeah, we tighten up every year to make sure that.
I'm sorry.
Everybody who needs to be involved, that's just for FTE changes, and frankly, if somebody wants a new HMEO, it's not really, it's clear what that costs.
Mhm.
I had a question, and it kind of, dovetails from, the schools had a large turn back at the end of FY 23 that we just finished. And my question is what sort of analysis do you guys go through on each of the individual budgets with respect to whether there's any turn back, what that turn back is? And, is it identified in a place that is available to us to see? And how does that in turn play a role, if at all, in budget planning for FY 25?
Yeah, when we do our budget reviews, we have the BVAs and we go through with the department managers. Where their spending was versus the budget, and we ask them to explain if there's a significant turn back. Lately, some of those turnbacks, and I think the schools are experiencing the same thing, is we've had a lot of turnover, so that we've had salary turnback. On occasion, we have a new hire who's making less than a former person, so for most of the departments, most of the appropriation is in salary, so that is where we focus a lot on. And some of in public works in particular, there's a lot more money in expenses and we focus on.
Yeah, so I know we spent more on energy, right, than we anticipated, but my focus was primarily on
Mhm.
salaries, and so where is that information kept? How can we look at it and see what the performance was, with respect to how many of our positions were actually filled, and, what the balance was that was appropriated through the operating budget, but not yet actually expended on the personnel side.
First BVAs will.
And what's that, what's
show,
that acronym for?
Budget.
I'm not in your business, so.
Yeah. It's in when we give you the book,
Budget versus
the
actual.
5 year, how do you do a 5 year day?
Yes.
5 year of expense to budget, so, but, in terms of where does it show in terms of which positions were vacant during the year, we can look into how we.
I just am, so I'm interested in that, and then also what role that plays, if any, as you're projecting your budget or planning your budget for the following year. And if it's a chronic position that isn't filled, for example, or something along those lines, I, for one, would just like to hear a little bit about what the analysis is with respect to, should it be continued or other types of things, so that would be something I'm interested in this year.
Understood.
There are, to go a little further into that, there are several things that we look at. One, departments are advised to explain when there's a large turnback, so people understand that particularly if it was a one-time event that caused, such as a long-term vacancy in a position. Some of the departments, what it is, it's not that it's a particular position, but one position becomes vacant. By the time you get that filled, another position becomes vacant. So it's not as though it's the same position that's been vacant. Since COVID's been a little more problematic, the departments are to explain it. The second area in terms of analytics, looking at it, I actually discussed it in the annual audit. And the whole manager, which you'll recall Dick Riley would always read through and point it out, but in the management, a lot of management discussion and analysis, I would identify key departments that had larger turnbacks than normal and explain what those are. And as the town manager mentioned, oftentimes it's related to staffing issues that there were vacancies. In the last couple of years, public safety has had some of the higher turnbacks of late because of the delay in terms of hiring, either because attracting candidates, because of the civil service process for public safety, both were subject to civil service and to the training time. So they've had some larger turnbacks in the last few years. And those are where the discussions are.
Yeah, because it's obvious that we're gonna have pressures on the budget. Probably greater now and going forward than we ever have, certainly in the last 5, 6, or 7 years. And so as we have that, and whether you have grants that are coming offline that you're gonna need to supplement, or we have, collective bargaining, or we have our capital projects that you speak to, or cleaning costs or energy costs. I mean, those are all, when we have all those costs go up, I think it also requires that we look at, positions that we have and other types of things, and if we're not filling them or things like that, that maybe we might have to start looking at some trade-offs. And so I'd just like to have that be part of the on the screen of what is looked at and discussed this year. Thank you. That's all I had, Madam Chair.
Kate, in the past couple of years, we've seen priority 0 budget requests in DRSR4s. And I think there's been confusion about how to interpret those. Whether they're looking to be put in the budget for this year or for future years. I just want to, is it possible to make it clear when those are looking to be funded? Because I know some of them have been funded through ARPA when it was clear maybe they wouldn't have been able to be funded in the budget. And then others have been just resubmitted the following year. And so I think there's just question on how those are treated.
Yes, I think the goal of the departments is to say, we're gonna want a position in the future, so it's almost like a capital plan for staffing, and so we're trying to find the best way to put that out there. I know when we were building new schools, for instance, we would, in the capital plan, we would say we're gonna need 2 custodians and an HVAC tech. So we're trying to find the best way to preview what we might be thinking about, but it's by no means and it's not a certainty. And it's not a certainty that the positions that were funded by ARPA will continue. There certainly are some that will be requested.
Thank you.
Mary, no? So with respect to, the preview with positions that are going to be losing funding because of grants, I think I'd like to understand and have the departments explain if it's an expansion of service, why that has to continue. Because the point of grant funding and certain other fundings is we're providing a service that we otherwise don't. So, why are we expanding our services?
I would expect you to have full conversation about every DSR.
I'm sure we will. I'm sure we will, but they should just come prepared.
Oh, they will. Yes, it's particularly in the area of youth mental health, like they will be.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I think we're good on the budget consultations.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. All right, so moving on to the October special town meeting warrant. We're going to discuss together amending the fiscal year 2024 sewer operating budget and water operating budgets.
Yes,
Dave?
Madam Chair. In both instances, the only line that will be in the final warrant is the MWRA assessment. There is no need to adjust salary and wages in either of those budgets. In the case of the sewer enterprise fund budget, the final assessment for FY 24 came in, and it came in $112,379 less than what budget we went forward with back in the spring. In the case of the water, that came in slightly more than what town meeting appropriated for $989. And because it's a standalone appropriation line, that's why we have to have the line amended. It can't just be offset by some other expense.
Okay, and as a reminder, the MWRA assessment is based upon usage for the prior calendar year. So it's not on a fiscal year basis and it's not ongoing. So if anyone remembers a wet summer, the assessment is actually on a prior.
Sorry,
Summer.
there's nothing to repeat.
It wasn't important enough for there to be anything to repeat.
So this wet summer that we just had won't be reflected.
Until the following fiscal year, yeah.
So are these articles, are they ready to be voted on, or are they?
I think so.
I believe
Yeah.
So, and what you're saying, Dave, salary wages line items are staying the same. And it's just the MWR assessment of each one that's being,
Mhm.
Correct. So the only thing that'll be published is line 201D and 301D.
Okay.
So I will entertain a motion. Anybody would like to make a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion to be one to approve them one at a time, I guess. So
Mhm.
Make a motion to approve the amended sewer enterprise fund budget,
Is there a second?
article X.
I second that.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Abstention? Unanimous. Okay, to have a motion regarding the water operating budget.
Sure, since I'm on the roll, motion to amend the fiscal 2024 water enterprise fund budget as noted in the town meeting warrant draft.
I second that.
Okay, any further discussion? No? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstention? It's unanimous. All right. So now we also have two articles about surplus bond proceeds and recent debt or authorization that are also connected. Dave,
Yes.
do you have information on those?
All
Wonderful.
set, and again, those two articles work together. The first one is, the, Central Avenue Elementary School, the Williams School project is done. We've received our reimbursements from the MSBA, final bonds were, all settled. And the final, accounting by the state as well as ourselves is done. We have excess borrowed proceeds of $286,000. By state law, the funds have to be appropriated for use of a project that you can borrow for a similar term or longer. And in the case of the Williams School, the only project that we have going right now that would relate would be the Emery Grover project. The recommendation is to appropriate $286,000 of the Emery Grover project. So we're giving them the cash of $286,000. The bond, the rescind debt authorization is reducing the borrowing authorization for the Emery Grover project by the same $286,000. So they're not getting additional funding. In the end, it's still the same budget that they're working with. We're just swapping out borrowing authorization for cash, which was borrowed. Second piece to that, just an informational, is because the Williams School project was funded by a debt exclusion, and this $286,000 was raised. What this does is with the transfer, the project is, the Williams School project is credited with a $286,000 credit, which reduces the amount that's going to be raised on the tax rate. The taxpayers don't need to pay for the $286,000 that they had approved because it's not being used for the Williams School project. So that would be the other effect of these votes that town meeting would take. So we would ensure the Emery Grover project is working with the same budget as before. Secondly, that the amount that the taxpayers will have to pay related to the Williams School project will be $286,000 less than what they would have had to pay if this action isn't taken.
Okay. Any questions?
Just a quick question, is there a cost associated with reducing the borrowing authorization for Emery Grover?
No,
I just want to
Josh?
thank Dave for identifying this funding opportunity, and regardless of the merits or whatever you think about Emery Grover, this is I think a good decision to reduce the debt on it.
Any other questions?
So David, the 286, it was borrowed at some point in time.
yes,
And then it ultimately turned out whatever projected expenses for the Williams School at the end, for that 286 was not needed.
was not needed basically because the final reimbursement is higher than anticipated.
From the MSBA.
Yes, correct.
Okay, all right. And are those, so in a sense, we spent the funds, but actually we got a reimbursement.
Correct.
Of it, okay, so it's not like we've been holding, not that you do it otherwise, but it's not like we've had these funds and we've been investing them with other funds and it was that, we incurred the debt and now the reimbursement of it was such. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you for that explanation.
And the effect on the tax bill is gonna be minimal
Correct.
on the average.
To the average taxpayer, but in aggregate, it's $286,000 being.
Okay,
So. Please, I'll make a motion that the finance committee recommend adoption of the article entitled transfer of surplus bond proceeds. With respect to the $286,000 being transferred from the Sunita Williams School project.
Second.
okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I call for a vote. All those in favor of John's motion? Any opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous.
Then to dovetail that, I will then make a motion that the finance committee approve or recommend approval of the article entitled rescind debt authorization, which will use the $286,000 from the previous article to reduce, the need to borrow that amount on the Emery Grover project.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of John's motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? It's unanimous. Okay, our next set of articles deal with mitigation funds for roadway improvements and intersection improvements.
Yes, the first item which appears on page 1 of the draft document. This is $205,000, which Eversource paid to the town for repair of the roads that they were working in, specifically Webster Street. And which will cover the town's cost to do the repaving, because Eversource was not, didn't want the responsibility of doing the repaving. We can't just use the money that they paid to us. It's recognized to be general fund monies to go into the general treasury. So the only way that we can accomplish using these funds for the street is to have them appropriated. It says raised from the tax levy, because that's the term that has to be used, but the tax levy in this case will be identified as a miscellaneous, non-recurring revenue, which will be $205,000 from Eversource. And
They're not done though, they're still working.
this is this particular area that there are others that areas that they work in that they do the paving, but for whatever reason, they don't take this.
And so Dave, who decided on that amount, 205,000 as opposed to 195,000 or 225,000?
That's what the engineering, DPW, determined the cost to be in order to have the contractor.
So we set the price as opposed to
Yes,
Eversource.
yeah,
That's what
Eversource,
they think it is.
correct.
And do you get an accounting, sort of like a true up when it's done, to see if that's the cost we incurred or the?
Well, I'll certainly know, the warrant article that the expenditures will be directly against the warrant article that we're tracking with his own general ledger account number.
Okay,
But that's the estimate based on our contract pricing that we paid to the hot top.
it'll be like any other line item in the budget that,
Well, there's not the budget, this would be a warrant article,
okay,
but
right,
the methodology
Yeah.
is the same.
So if it comes in under, it'll go to free cash.
right.
It would close, yes.
But if the or the actual cost is over, DPW will have to figure out where to,
There would have to be their
Right,
operating
out of their
budget,
operating budget, or it could be a capital roadway.
or from the
Right.
capital roadway improvement.
Yeah,
That's appropriated every year.
okay,
But if
If
it's,
it was over, though, you can't then go back to Eversource for the,
No, this was a good bid estimate, which I'm comfortable with. The only reason I think it would go over is that town did more. Let's say they decided to work on the sidewalks in the area that Eversource didn't touch, then
Mhm.
it would be appropriate that either the capital appropriation or the operating budget would be charged. But this was a good bid estimate that the town did.
is it common for the town to charge Eversource to do?
But no, this was unique. Usually it's utilities responsibility to
Right.
repave, but they're not as tentative to the detail. The town prefers gutter to gutter, the whole thing to be done. And sometimes if the companies do, the companies says, Eversource, of course, are both gas and electric now. But sometimes they just want to patch the actual hole itself, so it's always a difficulty, and this is basically how they came to an agreement on doing this particular area.
so they are doing this in other communities as well, and one of the other reasons is they're having issues with contractors, shortages of contractors, just like everyone else is.
Right.
So they're not able to get to the work, and this way cities can, and towns can take care of the work that needs to be done. Okay,
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the Finance Committee recommend adoption of the article entitled appropriate for roadway improvements Eversource.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I call for a vote. All those in favor of John's motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Abstentions? It's unanimous. All right, so we have another similar article, which is appropriate for intersection improvements.
Yes, Madam Chair, which is on page 2 at the top.
Mhm.
This is a payment, $30,000, which was required by the planning board of Children's Hospital to mitigate impact at the intersection of Kendrick and Route 128. 30,000 is to be spent. It's gonna be doing lane markings and such on Kendrick, leading to the 128 exit. And just like the 205,000, the only way these monies can be used is by a town meeting appropriation. And just understand, when one gives a gift, the town can accept the gift and spend it according to the donor's wishes, or is not to the donor's wishes. However, if a payment is made as part of a regulatory process, in the case of this is getting a permit issued by the planning board, that's not considered voluntary, of course, and therefore, if it's not voluntary, it's not a gift, and hence why it has to be considered a general fund receipt. And because this payment was required specifically for specific purposes, that's why we need to appropriate it. So that that work is done. DPW will be doing the work.
Okay. Do you know how the planning board came up with 30K? What it was meant to cover?
I don't know specifically. I know that the planning board does consult, the planning department does consult with engineering and building department and fire department, police department on various issues. So I do not know for a fact that this was determined by DPW, but I believe that it came from some consultation that they had.
Well, this,
But it's not a plan for a light, correct?
No.
Which is really what should be the. at least
this is at Third Avenue, it's not at Kendrick and one.
No, it's
Right.
heading down further
Right.
and there should be, there's
Another
so much
light.
traffic there, there should be another light there, at least in my opinion.
That
But this is not
30,000
for
would
that.
have done.
No.
I know it's not, but is there thought about why there isn't? I mean, it's
Well, there is.
it's
a-
borderline dangerous, really, because people are trying to come up from Third Avenue and try to get across to head into Newton.
So this
And
is
the
the left,
traffic is-
right? This is where, yeah.
No, is that Fourth Avenue though? Or which
That's
one, where's
Third.
the one that has the light?
Third.
I thought those.
That's Third,
has a light fourth though.
right,
That's
so this is,
that's
Fourth.
where the light should be. is
Right, it's
Fourth.
Fourth, but
By
this,
the
this is
first- And
specifically for Third Avenue, because Children's Hospital is on Third Avenue. I mean, it's to access it, it's gonna be, you'd access it that way, not on Fourth
Mhm.
Avenue,
That's Third, that's.
Right,
Fourth's the
right.
third one.
correct?
I think people are very interested in traffic, so this may, some discussion is happening.
And
Yeah.
more interested if that's the way you happen to draw it too.
I assume there'll be more information specifically detailing exactly what the 30,000 will do in the warrant.
Yes.
Yes. Right, because when you look at it, there's already a light at Third
Correct.
Avenue,
There
there's
are
already
already
lane markings
lane
at
markings.
Third
Correct,
Avenue. You
exactly,
wonder what more is needed
exactly,
there.
that's why, I mean, that's exactly what I was wondering myself.
Nomination of the second one.
It's the lane markings in order to, yes, to condense the turn lane.
There's
To go
currently
the
two
exit,
turn lanes south.
to go down to the
This will
exit
change that.
onto 128.
Oh, so this isn't Third Avenue, it says Third.
North
It
of
says
Third.
Third Avenue.
That's-
Oh.
Okay,
But
that's
the
what it says in
traffic-
the children's permit.
Yep, all right,
But it's the
Oh, I
traffic
see what
that's
you're
resulting
saying.
from
Okay.
Third Avenue
right. So
that
that's very
may be confusing for
Yes.
getting on and off the highway, so they're doing the restriping and.
I know
That
exactly.
is confusing.
That is very confusing.
We'll get you the fine.
I have to work on it.
Yeah.
I never open it.
I remember.
Neither am I don't know what anybody's talking about.
Do you ever come up Kendrick and?
I mean, I know where that is, I just, yeah, that's
It's
familiar with
weird.
it.
It looks like
Yeah.
you're gonna be
Yeah.
driving on the wrong side
Exactly.
at a point.
Okay.
And the restriping will help to get rid of that illusion that you're driving on the wrong side.
Someone told me that was state jurisdiction there. Maybe that's wrong though.
It's true,
It
but we
is?
got approval.
Oh, okay.
They got.
Can you put pictures in the warrant?
We can put them on the green.
Do we want to wait until we have a little bit more information about exactly what's happening on this?
Well,
one?
I think. This is just to appropriate the money. I don't think,
Right.
I don't feel we need any more information.
Okay.
So I would, make a motion on the finance committee recommend adoption of the article entitled appropriate for intersection improvements, Children's Hospital.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor of Don's motion?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Abstentions, it's
Still want
unanimous.
the letter for that.
Okay, so we're gonna sign, I'm gonna sign this to you and you can.
Oh, you don't want me involved in traffic, and then I get my own lots of pet peeves, but that's okay.
But, okay. All right, foster property resolution. And I see we have members of the board of selectmen who would like to come talk to us, and Kaylee, town manager. Thank you for
Yes.
your letter earlier today. I know it was a lot of work to put this together on short notice. We appreciate it.
If it was exactly one way. You know, I could read it on the spot.
So we had sent a number of questions in preparation for our discussion for the special town meeting warrant. I think it's good that we discuss what the finance committee is thinking, so selectmen have time to review and address whatever questions. So I think I'm just gonna open it up for questions. We have questions on the letter that we received today from the town manager, or other questions that you want to address directly to the select board members who are here.
Oh, just
Yeah.
a question. I think perhaps you heard last 2 weeks ago when we had the discussion, a lot of the focus was on process. I think it's fair to say that this has been a very abnormal or atypical process. And I just was curious to hear from your perspective, if you agree, and if you think that there's anything that could be done to make it a bit more transparent and more in line with the way that other property acquisitions have gone.
Kate may comment, but I think most other property acquisitions that you're thinking about, the town was directly acquiring property from a seller. And in this case, the town is not directly acquiring property from a seller. And the seller has been complicated, to be fair. I mean, they've already had a failed sale fall through. They now have another buyer. It's been going on for quite a while. They've decided to stay working with that buyer, is our understanding, but we are always at a length from that and not privy, in fact, to all of those discussions. So I think it's complicated for us too.
I think, I'm not aware of other examples where the town has been in this position where it's not buying directly from there's two essentially serial transactions going on, where the negotiations are kind of happening all at once. I think the tricky part in terms of getting people knowledge about what's going on is, a lot of the times we don't know what information the town has and what information the town doesn't have. And so it's hard to ask questions. It's hard to get information that we hope to have, because we don't know if the town is in possession of that information or not.
So I think that's fair, but I think it's also fair, we have said at each juncture when we get a question, what we have and what we don't have, right? And the piece of the transaction that we're a part of was the part that was voted at town meeting, which was the willingness to pay $2.5 million for 34 acres to be used for open space purposes. So that piece is clear, right? And then the other pieces have continued to shift around us as time has gone on. The fundamental shape continues to be identical, at least as of this moment, identical to what it was when we started talking about it a year ago in advance of town meeting, which is, the entire Foster property, half of it basically coming to the town. Of the remaining 28-acre parcel, roughly half of it to be used for cluster development, half of it to be used for buffer space around it to protect the neighborhood in that sense. And 70 units with 5% affordable. Trying to think any other major parameters. I think I've hit all of them. But so the shape of that hasn't changed.
So if
Continues to
that's
be
the
the
case,
same.
why the need for this?
So the issue is, as we laid out in the letter, right, that the state has come back and said, we know that we told you that 5% affordable would be acceptable, but we've determined that we're not going to do.
So how has the state communicated that and to whom, and how is that memorialized?
We'd be happy to provide that to you, but we have email from the state.
So I'd like the
Okay.
email before last fall and then the current one.
We're
indicating
happy
the
to
change.
provide both of those, but we have received both of those, so we're now providing new information.
We actually have two emails from them saying that 5% was acceptable, and the most recent is that they changed them.
And what threshold would now be acceptable to them, where they didn't opine on that?
25,
So it's 25, nothing in between.
Nothing in between.
not,
It appears that that's what they're saying.
Well, we can put forth we can create our own bylaw that allows for 5%.
it's one option.
That's one of the options. So the select board is trying to determine, we thought we had pretty clear direction from town meeting that this was something that they were interested in seeing happen for the town. So we are still trying to figure out what are all the available options to us. The developer and the seller are still talking. But there has to be a way to put together a deal so that it can go forward. And as you know, I'll come just a second, we always talked about this as an open space deal that happened to provide clustered housing and some affordable housing in an area of town that typically doesn't have it. So it presents an opportunity for some folks who typically would never have that opportunity. Karen,
I guess I'm wondering, so you just said, but town meeting, the town voted to buy 34 acres of open space for $2.5 million, right?
correct.
Okay, so does the town still have an opportunity to buy 34 acres of open space for $2.5 million?
Only if the first deal goes through.
Right, so
We're a part of that deal, so the $2.5 million essentially ends up with the seller, so it's a part of. the
sure, I
deal.
guess I kind of
Yeah.
knew the answer to the question. So my other question is, you said earlier also, town has not been directly dealing with the seller, and that's what is abnormal about this case. Because normally, if we were just gonna spend $2.5 million to buy 34 acres of open space, we would be dealing directly with the seller, and that would be like a super great bargain for the town, right? But so I guess what I'm confused is then, what are we going to add? So town meeting already said, yeah, we'd be really interested in making a deal like that. That seems super great. At least that's the way it was presented to me in my wearing a town meeting hat, like awesome. So now if that's not the option, and if buying 34 acres of open space normally in this area would cost what? Probably more than $2.5 million,
Mhm.
right? So what, is that what we're asking?
No,
town?
it's the
No,
same
no.
package. It's the same package deal.
No, I know, but I feel like why
Yeah.
would we go back to town unless we have a different package?
Yeah, what are we
We're going back for
asking them?
zoning. We're not going back for additional money. We're going back for zoning relief.
Right.
So we create zoning that says that if there were provisions for open space and for dense housing that then under those conditions, that the town would agree to put that zoning in place.
So is
For
that
that
zoning
particular
proposal in place? Is
property?
there a zoning amendment that we can
Yes.
all look at and
No,
see
There-
what it
No.
says?
There is not.
So how can we vote on something that we don't, that doesn't exist?
you're voting on the assumption that there will be something that would be acceptable.
And that
So
it
this
will
is
go
fair.
through a
I mean,
process.
it's not fantasy land. Where
Well,
are we?
this is this is like a trial balloon.
Yeah, but that's not what town
So,
meeting
well,
doesn't invest
we-
in fantasies. We invest in realities and what proposals are.
I'm not justifying, I'm telling you, that's what it is.
So,
Sorry.
I think, Kate, you want to make one comment, or,
Yeah, I think that I'm not sure if trial balloon is the right word or not the right word, but the proposal is to say to town meeting, should we go through the effort of creating this complicated zoning and bringing it to you for a vote in May? And if town meeting says no, we're gonna move on to other options. So I don't believe that a vote in October is a vote in May. I mean, it's really gonna depend on what the zoning is, but the sense is that it's a really complicated thing to work through. And we've done this once before when we were trying to make a decision as to whether to put a lot of effort into something. And that was one of the options that we thought of to see if this project can move forward in this way.
Right, but not take a vote.
yeah, sorry, Carol had her hand up.
So this clearly non-binding resolution is important to the buyer. I mean,
The seller maybe.
The seller. I think it's important to the seller.
Does the
more than
seller
the
told us
buyer.
that?
So, we had never spoken to the seller and we had asked on numerous times, we had written them a letter at one point asking to speak. Because we thought we might be able to help make the deal happen more if they understood where the town stood. That didn't happen until, I'm gonna say about a month ago. I didn't look at the date.
And
of
that was still a
meeting.
trustee, not so.
It was not the seller, you're correct. So the trustee and their realtor, in fact, got on the phone with the town to have a discussion to see if we would consider a rezoning and to understand what that might mean to them, what the timeline would look like for that, how long it meant that they would be waiting so that they could go present that option to the seller and see if the seller would be willing to wait. They did that and they came back to us and said, they would be willing to wait and we would be interested in seeing what the sense of town meeting is.
but
Sure.
they're waiting, I'm just trying to clarify what's going on here. So they're waiting for the non-binding resolution, but then we would go through the typical zoning process
Mm.
and public hearings
Mhm.
for and against
Correct.
this at Maytown meeting.
No,
So-
prior to Maytown meeting.
Well, prior to
Process
Maytown meeting,
to be
we
voted.
voted
To
at
bring it at
Maytown meeting.
Maytown meeting. that's correct.
So depending on how the public hearings go, there is still the possibility that it will then fail.
That's correct.
So,
And I can
Josh,
just, one more thing is
Yeah.
that then they have to go through the planning.
Well, I'm assuming
Well,
that's
they-
part of the.
Well,
They have to go through the
Yes.
planning, but the planning board is the one who proposes
The zoning,
right.
bylaw.
My only point was,
So they're gonna have to go through the planning board twice.
they wouldn't if it was a lip, that's my.
Right,
This
they
is an
got-
even longer process, that's.
Has
Yeah.
the planning board been consulted on this? And
at this point,
The planning board has had the same discussion that I had with your chair, right? We've not had further discussion with the planning board yet.
will you between now and October?
We certainly will be talking to the planning board between now and October.
Madam Chair, I'd like to have the planning board in for one of our meetings, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Josh,
But
and then Karen.
also, in the zoning bylaw, there is a provision for PRD development in this region. And that allows for clustered development. I don't know how many units, how big. Has it been explored to look at what could be developed under our current zoning bylaw? Not in terms of single units.
I know that the planning board looked at that at one point, and I don't remember the details. That was very early on in all this discussion. They looked at all different avenues that they had.
Okay.
So I can't tell you what happened, but I know that has been looked at.
Well, I think, Josh, if you look at whether it's the planned residential development that's in there, or the residential compound that's in there, so there are both provisions that are in there. what the developer is looking to do is much more extensive than the allowed under each of those, so that's why they're trying to get around those in the manner in which they're proceeding here.
Well, to be fair, those were actually kind of done thinking purely about housing, not thinking about open space, right? So we're working with, open space actually is our primary value from the town's perspective here, but open space and housing are both factors.
But this
in
zoning doesn't touch the open space. The zoning is specific for the housing, right?
Right.
No, well, that's not
The
what you-
proposed zoning will include something about set asides for open space.
And then this town will pay for the set aside? I guess
The-
this
the
is why
town
we
would still
need
be
language, yeah.
contributing to the deal,
Project,
to the project.
The only
To
thing
the
the town
tune of
can do with 2.5
$2.5
million is to
million?
buy 34 acres of land on Charles River Street. That's the only thing we can use that 2.5 million for. So if the zoning allows the same project that we told Tom meeting we were thinking about doing with the lift, if that were ever to be the case, it would be the same deal. We can't make that case right now with the lift because we've had changing circumstances with the DHCD.
okay, I'll just.
So I just want to say,
Yeah.
so you're asking town meeting to vote. Which the vote at town meeting would be a non-binding approval by town meeting. To approve the select board moving forward with proposing an expensive planning board proposal. Which that non-binding vote by town meeting would provide some sort of cover then. To any of the costs going forward with moving this, if in fact, moving forward with then the planning board and zoning proposal. Would fail in some capacity, or if that point, the people who were opposed to this came in some sort of uprising. We'd be able to say, well, town meeting wants it, so we still have to go forward with it. Is that the way I'm kind of seeing that too? That like, why would we normally go back to town meeting to say, hey, have we done this before? Where
Like,
select board has
town-
said, we want to propose a really expensive thing to get this thing done. But now we're gonna go back to town meeting, and if town meeting says it's okay, then we'll make this big expenditure on behalf of the town. Because town meeting said the whole town wants to do it. That's
I'm
what it
sorry,
feels like to
I'm
me.
lost at, we want to propose this really expensive thing.
Well, it seems to me like it would be expensive to propose rezoning that whole area, would it not? Is that an expensive thing to do?
They do rezoning all the
resources.
time. There is,
Resources.
it is a resource
Planning
question, but
Yeah.
And
Planning
there's
resource.
traffic studies,
Right.
there's.
Yeah. Yeah.
Expenses along those lines, you're gonna bring in a consultant, that's what the planning board does when they look at zoning. Possible zoning amendments or changes to areas, is that they will have a consultant, they'll do a traffic study, they'll do a full. Investigation as they should. And then they will come forward with a proposal. That they'll seek town meeting to approve, to change our bylaws.
Okay. Well, can I, just a different line of questioning, so, Ms. Cole, you said that the town has not been, or spoken with the seller. That was not my understanding, I think, you and I had a phone conversation early November 2021. Right, my understanding was that the town was approached by the seller.
the town was approached by the seller at one point, and I would have to go back to look to find exactly which month. There has been one conversation directly with the seller at one point in this process,
Was that with you? Or,
with me.
okay, because I think there's also another conversation with the then chair of the Conservation Commission as well.
That was the realtor, I think. I thought that was the realtor that contacted me.
Yeah, I was gonna say the chair of the
I've not
Conservation
spoken to the-
Commissioner has, to the best of my knowledge, never spoken to the seller. Or the former chair, yeah, has only spoken to, they were the person who was originally contacted by trustees of reservations when it was starting to go on the market.
Who was also an interested buyer, is that? correct?
No, they were never an interested buyer. That's why they came to the town. Barry?
Has it been? Putting my finance committee hat on, so my town meeting, has there been a financial study done of what the implications are if this gets built to the town? I mean, you gotta have 7 units valued at whatever, during X amount of taxes. I'm just curious if you've seen any sort of estimate, and I can roughly guess what it might be in my head, but I'd just be curious if we actually went through that exercise. I mean, there's lots of non-financial implications to putting 70 units on that street.
Go back to the area here.
But also just infrastructure
Right.
too.
The
What
cost
would cost of the
associated with
infrastructure?
servicing that,
Correct, because
Kind
it's
of
more than
part
the
of-
$2.5 million, we're gonna have, but, you know, having 70, probably $1 million plus homes for generating. It's a lot of money. So we should do it purely for financial reasons, but we should have some analysis of what that would look like.
So I think conceptually, I have two separate issues. One is, why do we need a resolution? Because you already have a town meeting vote appropriating the $2.5 million with an outline of the transaction, which really doesn't sound like it's gonna change.
So we're not anticipating a change. I think the goal was just to get a current read on where town meeting is.
Could you do a survey?
Yeah, or
but I mean, they,
public.
in fairness, they told you last May where they were.
October, so it's a year ago.
Okay, October, a year ago.
I think the reality is we need the vote in October, so they'll wait until May. But if we tell them to wait till May, they'll probably walk away.
So it's really for the,
The
This-
non-binding vote, so it's an expression of interest.
Yeah.
That would keep them, hopefully keep
the seller
project alive.
negotiating
Stating.
with the buyer.
Correct.
Correct.
Still, everything's contingent on whether or not how the zoning is written, and if it then passes, it may or may not.
So I guess the second conceptual issue here is the town putting itself into the middle of a private transaction. So if the seller, if this is not really economically feasible, like, you know, what guarantee do we have that this is economically feasible?
Well, the 5% affordable was economically feasible to the developer, and the town was in the
And do we
process.
know
because-
that?
Any way other than they just said it? And did they give any pro formas, any projections,
They were
anything?
prepared.
We would have had
to-
one if they filed a project eligibility letter, but I would say that them signing a purchase and sale agreement and committing their funds, you know, indicates that they were willing to spend that money to buy that property and make it affordable. The town was involved in it because it was gonna be a LIP. I mean, in this case, it's actually even a broader town involvement because it's town meeting getting to say what it was shaped like as opposed to
Right,
the.
but
select
then now we
board's.
get different information though. It's a different kind of involvement.
Well, I guess I'm not sure because the select board's development agreement had an agreed upon set of parameters, 70 units, not to exceed 70 units, 14% buffers, 34 acres, 200 foot and 100 foot setbacks. Those things would now be, either those or something different would be approved by town meeting based on the development of the zoning, if we have to go to the zoning route, so.
And then how does the town, like, how does the town piece then fit in?
It's part of the agreement between the buyer and the seller that land gets conveyed. And part of the reason that they would continue to talk is that having this land for open space is something that the seller considers a value of the particular transaction that's presented by the developer in combination with the town. Right, their father was the first, head of the environmental department in Massachusetts, and that is a value of the family, and that seems to be something they've concluded that they would really prefer to see relative to other options that were presented to them.
And so, I mean, at the risk of being like completely missing the point, then why aren't they just selling us those
Right.
30 acres for the $2.5 million? Why aren't they just selling it to us directly? And now we can be out of the business of trying to make a transaction financially viable
We wouldn't
for.
have, we still need the town to approve the
The
development.
zoning.
They do not. They can sell their property for whatever the fair market value of the property is. I think the bottom line is they're trying to sell it for more than what they can,
Correct.
right,
This deal is
Right,
maximizing the value.
right,
to the
right.
town.
So, but if that's so important to them, Like, we could just buy,
So you're correct. They can maximize the
Right.
revenue to the seller by putting all single family homes there.
right,
Right, and they concluded that if this could work, that seemed to achieve both the family's goals. And the town has been interested in the open space very much.
right. Yeah, I don't think
So,
we're debating the
but
value.
you
of
can't
open space.
sever those two pieces. They're intricately related.
Only because of, that's their choice, that's not our choice.
The sellers, right,
The seller's making it that way.
And the buyer developers forcing this timeline, make a decision now type of thing.
Just like they did last fall. It's like deja vu all over again. I mean, we're being forced the
Right.
same way that we were forced a year ago.
The question is whether, they sell it to somebody who puts up some number of single family homes, which is just another option that they could do. And the land isn't, that we're out of it and the land isn't preserved. So that is one of the options that's gonna happen. They're not, I don't want to speak for the seller, but I mean, they want to get their, what they think the value of their property is. They're not gonna sell us 34 million for 2.5. I mean, that would be
How
great.
old are the sellers? Sorry, I mean, like, is there a,
No,
We-
these are
Tom.
the landowners, right? The parents both passed away.
okay, so it's
These are
the
the
estate or
children,
the
so it's the
children?
estate with the children, neither of whom live in this area anymore.
You don't have any other questions?
So could we, as John said, could we have the planning board?
yeah,
in?
and we'll certainly let you know when we come in.
And I think I also understood that you wanted to see the specific emails that we have
Mhm.
related to the 5%, which we can.
And the 25.
Yeah, everything that was sent forth
Yeah,
in our
everything,
letter.
yeah,
And
So
then as well as whatever supporting document there is. That Northland is relying on or stated that anything more than 5% affordable is not economically feasible for them.
So I think what Northland has said all along is that more than 5% of the town is welcome to pay additional funds if we would like additional affordable housing there.
Okay, so they
From
haven't
the-
said is.
From the
economically-
select, so economically feasible is part of it, because as you know, with these particular developments, they are required to account for all of their funding at the state.
Mhm.
And if in fact they make more than 20% profit, then they will need to give money back to the town. So
Right,
they're gonna
but they
have
won't
to
need
account
do that
it.
under this zoning proposal. They wouldn't need to do that, correct?
If it has
Haven't written it
affordable
yet.
housing in it, I think we can write it in
We
such a
haven't
way
written
that it could be required.
You could have something to look at as opposed to guessing, and I
Well,
think that's what the biggest
We're
problem,
all
at
gonna
least
be
from where I
working to
stand.
figure out what this is, I mean, but that was what we said, we can't do that between now and October and have a public process.
But then we're just asking for town meetings on informed opinion. And that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah.
Like, what is the
That's-
value of having this if we can't get the information in time?
I think the other concern is that instead of the town working through the best bylaw that serves the town interest, along the way, we're going to be drafting a bylaw that serves really the private developer or seller's interest. So I think like that.
It's
has to
not
be-
unprecedented.
What's that?
It's not
I know it's not
We did
unprecedented,
that for Muzzy.
Well, and for children's and
Yeah.
for West Street, I mean.
yeah, but
Zoning evolves.
I think the question is if DCHD has the authority to do a 5% affordable housing lit. We're just saying that town meeting has the authority if they give it to themselves, and do they want to look into that avenue? So that's where it is, same deal, same everything, we're just wondering where the authority to do a lit. It's not lit anymore,
I think it's the
Come from.
same deal, same everything
yeah,
that needs to be.
that I think stays, that's baked in cake. We're just wondering where the authority comes from, we're asking town meeting, are you interested in using this authority town meeting has?
But since it's a non-binding resolution, in point in fact, you're not asking town meeting to do anything. you're just giving some assurances to the developer that this is moving forward.
I think it's also just, determining what we do with our next 7 months. And if town meeting says we just
Right.
don't want to do this, then we're not focusing on writing significantly, and the planning board having hearings on complicated zoning when we have other zoning. That's
But Kate, they already told you they wanted to do it. They wanted that deal,
people feel differently
And-
about. I,
but there's always going to be a zoning change. Right, or
Well,
going
there
around it,
wasn't.
No, it was,
There
that
wasn't
was the
before.
purpose of the lift, was that
But
it
it-
avoided.
but
all
in
of
fact,
this.
yeah. In fact, it is spot zoning and, but not
No,
really.
no.
When you're doing it around it. It's the same thing, really. So,
Is the zoning amendment just restricted to this parcel of property, or will be applicable to all single residence area?
I don't know the answer to that question as we sit here today.
I
No,
think,
it cannot be spot zoning.
yeah,
No, I'm not.
But it's not-
that's
yes,
my
it
question. It will be applicable to, if you look up at SRA, this single
You've got
residence.
the address right now,
it's on the
44.
map. It's
So
not
it'll be
the-
applicable to any other parcels. What's that?
That's not what it says.
It's current.
Amending the
So
zoning
it's just
bylaw.
gonna be to this specific piece of property. All I have
Okay.
for tonight.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for coming. Thank you. We'll be at the planning board on the 27th. If they're available. Otherwise, we have 2 more scheduled meetings, but I would prefer sooner rather than later.
Great.
All right, specialized energy code. So there is a special town meeting warrant article on the specialized energy code, and I just wanted to again have an internal discussion of the questions that we have. And this is something that I know a little bit about. And so I had some specific questions that I wanted asked. And I don't remember who is proposing this, whether that was a select board. Yeah, it is select board proposing this. So I don't know if any of you have nothing.
I'd just like to understand, for purposes of our discussion, decision on this is. So the evolution of it, what our current applicable energy code is, when that was put in place.
Mhm.
What was it prior to that? So if I'd like to have a chronology so I can understand this in the context of what's come before it, and where we are presently. I'd also like to hear from, our building inspector about it. And I understand we have a new building inspector, but I'd like to get, their input and view on it. And then I think I'd like to hear, so those are the first 2 things that I need or want as part of my deliberation on this.
Okay.
and I just can't remember, but wasn't it only, because it was pre-COVID?
It was pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID.
It was a few years ago.
So, but probably
That was
not
the
more than
stretch code.
4 that we approved the stretch code, right?
Yeah, it was yeah. So I think one of the questions is, what is the code that's in effect today? Because it was a new building code with some new energy requirements. We have the stretch code, and now this would be a specialized opt-in code. And also an understanding of whether anybody's, done an analysis of costs, that may be associated with the new energy code.
Does it also, and I would imagine it wouldn't, but does it trap buildings in the construction process? So would it apply with this new code apply to Emery Grover, or is that the old stretch code?
It says here that it'll be effective as of July 1, 2024. So
But they're midstream, so what does that mean?
Mhm.
Well, they're gonna be finished next May. Before. July
Oh,
20
true.
July, they're gonna be finished before then. Hopefully.
But it would apply presumably to the next construction project and then, you know, like the usual questions, like if someone's just redoing their kitchen. Like, are they now gonna have to bring
Mhm.
their house up to code? I mean, these are all the same questions we had
Right,
with the
right.
stretch code last time.
But the stretch code is not, this is actual.
This is, yes,
These
in
are-
addition to, right,
Right, but the stretch code really doesn't mandate what you can and can't do with your house,
no,
individuals, this will,
this will, yes, it's different, yeah,
it's very different.
yeah.
Will have significant potential, you're not gonna be able to do scope, for example.
We received a memo from the school department's director of finance, talking about the projected costs for Pollard and Mitchell. And actually, it sounds like because of the increased energy requirements in both the stretch code and the
The new building.
new building codes,
Mhm.
the cost per square foot is going up quite a lot.
I think that has much to do with materials and it wasn't just energy, but.
Yeah, we'll
Maybe
look
other
at,
components as well.
yeah,
but,
we can look at that more carefully too.
Yeah,
I think that your question on Josh is whether those new projections that just
Mhm.
made,
Mhm.
assume this will be in effect or not in effect.
Right,
my
I
understanding is
didn't
that
read
they
it
assume.
to have this being, that they considered this and what they did.
Uh, correct, I think if there's an increased cost would be on top of what was.
ahead.
I didn't do it.
She likes it.
I know.
So, Louisa, what will our procedure be on this then?
so I think we would like to invite the new building commissioner.
Yeah.
A member of the select board, and we'll just, some of them are here already, so they understand what our questions are before they come to the meeting.
I assume we'll get some detailed description of exactly what this means for
Mhm.
individual homeowners. As well as obviously
Mhm.
municipal buildings or any commercial building.
Yeah, and where it's an opt-in, you know, the question always is, there are other communities that are choosing to opt in effective January 1, 2024. Should we wait and see what happens there?
Do we have a list of communities that have?
I think there are quite a few of them, yeah. Brookline, Cambridge. Among them, yeah,
All the usual suspects.
right, but they can test it. And then they can come back and tell us what the problems were. And then we can avoid them. So, okay. Any finance committee updates? No? Not really, okay. I don't have any issues not reasonably anticipated for a new update.
I don't have any.
Everyone good? All right,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
all those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Please, just note the, select board are having a presentation Tuesday from the